Hello, Principles of Marketing. This is Jackie Moore for Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is all about how marketers collect the data that they need in order to make sound decisions. And what you see here are some of the basic ideas behind market research. It should be conducted in an ethical manner, and in fact, the Marketing Research Association does have a code of conduct. One of the things that I find most interesting about that code of conduct is there's a phrase called sugging. Sugging means selling under the guise of collecting market research. So in order for people to feel good about participating in research studies, they shouldn't be asked to answer some questions and then have it turn into a sales pitch. That's considered to be unethical. The intersection of marketing and information systems is very important in business today because the fact is most data is stored in an information systems database. And so marketing people must be proficient with technology, and IS professionals must understand the marketing function in order to support them well. The basic components of a marketing information system are shown here. We need to access important sources of data that you see across the top. That data is then linked to hardware and software in order to access the data to make useful decisions. Of the types of data that are available, companies always start with internal data, information within the company. For example, some of this internal information might include sales histories over the course of the company's time that it's been in business. And all of this data is usually linked to some sort of a company intranet, an internal corporate network that allows employees to access important databases. The word marketing intelligence essentially means any sort of useful information used for marketing purposes. And the fact is, marketing intelligence is a very broad domain that includes information about all of those factors that we talked about in a SWOT analysis. Marketing managers have to use marketing intelligence in order to stay on top of developing trends. So you see this word trends essentially means helping with the SWOT database. A specific subset of marketing intelligence is competitive intelligence, and we did talk about competitive intelligence as the way that companies get information on competitors. Market research is information that the company either hires out, outsources to be conducted on its behalf, or collects internally. Market research is all about how the companies scope the problems that need to be addressed through information, and then how they make a plan to collect, analyze, and interpret that data. We are very lucky in Missoula, Montana to have a very senior level of market research professional who helps with our market research classes. His name is Ed Stalling. He's at Maritz Research, M-A-R-I-T-Z. And some of you may see him around town. He's a drummer in one of the bands that plays locally. All marketing students will take a market research class from Dr. Plant, and any students taking the digital marketing certificate will also take that market research class. Acquired databases are information that companies pay to acquire. Oftentimes pay, some of them are free. The census is free, but they pay to acquire to get access to information. There are a lot of databases available to marketers in terms of, for example, geographic data, psychographic data, media habits and usage. And so simply knowing what databases are available to access this information is a key part of the market research professional's job. Again, what you see here is kind of the way the marketer interacts with the information systems component to establish a good market research database. When we talked about customer relationship marketing in Chapter 1, we talked about how important data mining is. The idea of accessing information on our existing customer database in order to better target our marketing efforts towards customer retention. In data mining, what you'll see on the right-hand side here is using that data to help understand which customers we want to retain. Remember, we tier customers, and what sorts of loyalty strategies we can use. We might do individualized offers or customized offers based on those customer retention strategies. We also talked about how do we know which customers are not profitable for us, and we use the database to identify those customers that we would like to abandon or fire. Once we know who our best customers are, we can also use that database to create a profile of those customers so that when we prospect for new customers, we try to acquire customers that essentially have a similar profile as our best customers. Market basket analysis essentially looks at what our existing customers are buying from us and how do we cross-sell and upsell to penetrate those accounts more deeply in terms of getting more revenue from existing customers. Market research is a rather lengthy and complicated process, and what we'll do in this class is essentially we'll talk about steps 1 and 2 in this process, and I will leave the later steps to Dr. Plant to teach you all in her market research class. As part of steps 1 and 2, this week I'm going to give you an opportunity to participate in a market research study for a local agency in town who's preparing a survey in order to help guide their strategy to pitch the Montana Department of Transportation to get their advertising account for the coming year in terms of how they would like to address drunk driving and seatbelt usage in the state of Montana. In terms of market research, there are essentially 2 types of data. There's primary data and secondary data. Secondary data or secondary research is data that already exists that was collected by somebody else for some other purpose that I as a marketing manager can gain access to. For example, within my company, we may have customer satisfaction studies, we may have salesperson feedback, we may have company annual reports, we may have accounting records that help me understand our cost of doing business for pricing. So internal secondary data is important to compile. External secondary data is data that exists from an outside company that I might be able to leverage for my purposes. At the bottom here we see government sources. The census database is incredibly useful and it's something that I rely on quite a bit in my own consulting that I do. Published research might be published by one of a number of thought leaders in the industry. In the technology industry, Forrester and Gartner are 2 of the biggest thought leaders, and they publish studies about emerging technology that I use frequently in my high-tech class. All industries have trade organizations that also publish studies about their industry, whether it's the boating industry or the gun industry or the marketing industry. And then syndicated research are ongoing databases that are available on a paid or subscription basis. And the fact is, our library is an amazing resource in terms of data. I think students sometimes turn to the internet when they have a research project and they spend a lot of time trying to find useful information. And if you go to the librarian, Susan Caro is our business librarian, she can pinpoint right away the best databases to help you out. Here are a variety of websites that are available to help for marketing research. Marketingpower.com in the middle is the American Marketing Association's database. In contrast to secondary data, primary data is data that the company collects for its own unique purposes. And typically primary research is scoped to solve a particular question that a company has, such as what would be the best target market for me to pursue with my new product. And within primary data collection, there are 3 primary types. I shouldn't have used primary again. There are 3 different types of data collection that can be used: exploratory, descriptive, and causal. Causal meaning cause and effect. This is not a typo. It is not casual research. Exploratory research is generally qualitative in nature, which means it is not subjected to statistical analysis, and it does not hold up to statistical inferencing and hypothesis testing. Exploratory research is designed to generate insights for future follow-up studies where hypothesis testing can be more rigorously done. Exploratory research typically involves some sort of probing of consumers at a depth level. For example, focus groups are a common form of qualitative research where 6 to 8 people might sit in a room and a moderator would ask them questions about a particular topic. These are commonly used in the political process. They're also commonly used in the film industry. And with reference to the ad agency in town trying to collect some data for a pitch to the Montana Department of Transportation, they would like to form an advisory group that will meet quarterly in a focus group format to advise them about message strategies for the campaign. Case studies study a specific household or business or individual, and they drill down in terms of how a particular company, say in a business-to-business context, makes decisions to use and purchase, for example, technology. Ethnographies are increasingly being used by marketers, where an ethnographer essentially studies through observation a group of people without them necessarily knowing what the exact research question or issues might be. Ethnographers are typically trained anthropologists who are trained in methods of observation. There's a saying in marketing that in order to really understand customers, you don't ask them what they want, you observe the problems that they have. Descriptive research is quantitative in nature, which means that it can be subjected to statistical analysis and statistical hypothesis testing. And for all of you who have gone through your stats class, you do understand the type of data that I'm talking about. This data can either be cross-sectional, which means it's collected at one point in time, or it sometimes can be longitudinal, which means some variables are collected at time 1, and then maybe 6 weeks later, another set of variables are collected at a later date. Some interesting quantitative studies actually follow a group of people year after year after year, which is commonly used in healthcare studies, for example. Causal research is designed in order to understand cause and effect. And the idea is that we as marketers try to understand independent variables, for example, a marketing strategy or an advertising campaign that might actually cause a change in consumer behavior, which would be the dependent variable. And in order to design causal research, we have to think very carefully about how to design the study so that we can control for variables that might offer alternative explanations for the change in the dependent variable. So let's say I'm designing a study where I want to study the impact of advertising on consumer choice. If I don't control for competitive actions, it could be that my competitor's strategy or the lack of availability of their product perhaps drove sales for my product, and I might think it was my advertising when in fact it was something else entirely. Observational research is collected through recording consumers' behavior. Oftentimes this is done without their consent. For example, cookie data. We know that marketers online use cookie data, but we oftentimes haven't been asked to opt into that. Some research companies send people to the store. They're called, one example would be mystery shoppers, for example, to see how customer service is handled. Unobtrusive measures might include things like In fact, this is true going through people's garbage to see kind of what sorts of things they throw out, and the mechanical would be online, like the cookie data. There are some really nice advantages of online research, and increasingly the research function has been moved online, but there are some disadvantages, of course, in terms of privacy and also in terms of the response bias of understanding who responds to these online surveys versus who does not. We'll see a couple videos in class about market research to bring this process to life, but for an introductory class, this is what you needed to know. Let's conclude with a joke. An interviewer asks the interviewee what one of her major weaknesses is, and the interviewee responds, "Oh, I'm sure my biggest weakness is my honesty." And the interviewer says, "I don't think honesty is a weakness." And the interviewee says, "I don't give a damn what you think." Okay, see you in class. Bye.